Welcome to Ask an Accountant. We have a special, super duper special guest today. Mr. Amit is with us. He is the tech god of all. That's probably giving him a little bit more than he's earned, but the reality, he has a tech company we're using for our internal tech department, and it's something that me and Lorna were at a tech seminar recently, and they just gave us a plethora of stuff. You gotta do blah, 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 blah. And we took all that wonderful information and said, Amit, take care of this. We need to have all this stuff in place, and everybody's going to have things. He was alluding to some things in the beginning where you have all sorts of technology issues, but Amit, I'm just going to turn it over to you, let you run with it, because this is very critical, because every day somebody gets at least one email of somebody trying to hack them, I'll bet.
Yeah, and maybe more than one. So yes, thank you for that introduction. My name is Amit. I've been in the technology space for about 2 decades and started TechFoo 16 years ago. Over the years, a lot has changed in technology, which we'll talk about a little bit today. But really, over the last few years, cybersecurity has taken a front seat, and it's done so because of the damage that's happening when people get hacked. And it's in various ways and lots of different vectors. AI is not making it any better for the normal consumer, where there's voice impersonation. So even phone calls really can't be trusted anymore, and all of that. So the landscape is changing, but there are some practical things that anyone can do to protect themselves and really make the right moves as they use their technology, whether it's their phone, their computer, or remote access, which is a large vector for hacking sometimes. So we'll hit on a few topics. I'm happy to answer questions or do discussion as we go. So my goal is not to take up the entire time with just a lecture, but give you some things to think about. Okay, so high-level goals, we'll focus on what matters as much as possible. I'm going to try to not use acronyms and jargon with what we do. The idea is to give you useful tips, things that you can take away with you, and for you to know how that affects you. Also, if you're a business owner, there's ways that technology can help you to make more money or at least save money. We'll talk about a few of those things toward the end. So yeah, feel free to, I think there's a raise hand option or write your question in the chat as we go. At a very high level, I know there's several bullets here, but we'll talk about the cloud, which I would say really directly has driven some of the increased cybersecurity needs, because now we're ultra connected. It's not your server or your desktop in your office and you can unplug from the world and do your work. Now, really, when you're working, most people mean that they're online doing something. So we'll talk about simple data protection and some of these words you hear out there like encryption and SSL and all these things. What does that really mean for you? Well, we'll talk about that. VPNs, which is a virtual private network. That's one of the few acronyms I will have to use because VPNs are very common, and I want us to understand what those are and why they're important. And then the two main platforms that people do business in nowadays is Microsoft 365 and Google Workspace. And then we'll talk about some software and hardware from there. So front and center is cloud. Cloud file storage is basically impossible to get away from. In particular, I'm guessing that you all probably at some point use either Dropbox, Google Drive, or OneDrive. These are tools that make it easy to share files, but also make it easy to accidentally share files with people that shouldn't have them through links that don't have passwords, or especially Dropbox, which is banned at, I think, more than half the Fortune 500. It is like very cavalier, and in the balance of security versus convenience, some of these tools are too convenient, meaning that they're very insecure. So you create a link, you send it out, put it on Facebook, and everyone can have your tax returns instantly. It's great. But if you don't want to share your tax returns with everyone, then there are steps you take. So in Google Drive or OneDrive, you can set permissions based on who's within your company or who's not. Or does it require, even if it's a Gmail account, does it require a login? Or is it just a unique link that's available without logging in? Those are things that sometimes don't get paid attention to, but if you do create a sharing link, watch that. Those options are there as you're creating the link, and it can make all the difference in terms of who gets access to that file that you meant to versus who doesn't get access to it if they were accidentally forwarded the link, or if someone's computer gets hacked. So consider this, which a lot of times people don't. If you trust someone, let's say Bill does business with me. So I get an email from Bill, and I look at it and I'm like, oh, I know Bill. That's great. He sent me something. It's a link. It's an attachment. Let me look at that. So what I'm not thinking about actively is Bill's computer might have gotten hacked, or somebody might have been able to somehow forge Bill's email address. So even when it's someone that you recognize, either the name, the email address, someone you do business with, the company is recognized, you have to be vigilant that you trust them. You don't necessarily trust the hacker that just took over their computer. And people don't often stop to maybe consider, hey, this is unusual. Bill usually sends me to his share file. He doesn't send me PDFs in an email. Or he would normally tell me that he's going to send me a link and I have to fill out a survey. He wouldn't just blindly send me a link. And so some of those things are just having that I would call it consciousness of the security landscape as you're interacting through the day. And it's not just email. These things happen through text messages all day. People click on a link that they were sent that they weren't expecting, because caller ID is very easy to forge. If you get a text message from someone or even a phone call, know that those are not that hard to forge. So someone could be calling you, which happens all the time with these Western Union scams where they tell you the police arrested someone. If you want them to get out of jail, you have to send them money. And they're sophisticated nowadays. But the very, very simple thing you can do is call the number back. It is very hard for them to hijack a number inbound. It is very easy to hijack a number outbound. So if I'm Bill and I want to call Judy, I can call Judy and it'll look like Bill's calling. Great. But if she wants to be sure, she should say, let me hang up and call you back. Then when she calls Bill and he's like, what are you talking about? Well, I didn't just call you. Now you've got some verification. So practical tip, it's something to keep in mind. And so now let's talk a little bit about why we're going to cloud storage. It is easy. Everything is the same in multiple places. So nowadays, people don't just have their one computer. They have their phone, they have a laptop, they might have a desktop. It synchronizes your files everywhere, which makes it easy for you to not have to remember to email yourself the latest copy or number the version of the file and all these things we used to do. Now you just know it's always the latest version, no problem. And it's synced through the cloud. It also makes it easier for us as an IT provider to do backup. Since it's in the cloud, we don't need your computer to be on. We don't need for you to close out of the file. We generally can just back it up in place. And if your laptop is lost or hard drive dies, it is rare that we have to do data recovery. Whereas years ago, data recovery was a significant part of our business. And it doesn't need to be anymore, because now when your hardware fails, you log into the next device and you keep moving. So your computer dying is not that big of a deal. We just replace the hardware. So one of the trends that you'll see that's happened over the last few years is a lot of what used to be very sophisticated high-end software and hardware has become accessible to the end user. Whether you're using this at home or in a business setting, the enterprise class technology has really made its way down to the end user, even at the ultra small level. Examples of that are Microsoft 365. It's a enterprise class system, and you used to have Exchange server and an IT team to maintain everything. And nowadays, it's fractional. Your IT team is managing your environment and your configuration, not $40,000 of hardware at $20,000 a year to maintain and license all that software to have your own email server. It's democratized in a way. QuickBooks, which obviously you're all very familiar with, and Netflix even at a consumer level. That's the proliferation of easy access to internet and cloud services that are fractional. So many people can be on one infrastructure. For data protection, this is a practical piece that we talked about phishing, where someone tries to get you to click a link and fall for something, so to speak, and give up your data or give up your access. However, there is still the physical security of what happens if you lose your computer. Someone steals it on a train or you leave it somewhere accidentally. Remember, you're already logged in to most things. If I go into your web browser, I'm guessing you already logged into certain sites, even if they're sensitive, or your browser saves the password. So imagine this: if you left your laptop in the train and someone brought it to us and they said, oh, hey, I forgot my laptop. I haven't heard it on in a while. Can you reset the password for me? It takes us under 10 minutes to crack a Windows local or cloud password. That is not rocket science. So whatever your password or PIN is, we'll blank it out. We'll get in there. So now we don't know if it's really their computer or not, but let's just say they take it to someone that knows what they're doing, gets into it. Now that they're logged into Windows, they're not going to be asked for 2FA. The bank is not going to ask for a hardware token if you require one. It's because it's not a new computer. As long as the username and password is there, and now I'm inside Windows pretending to be Bob, let's say, well, Bob's logged in. The computer doesn't look, it's not wildly different geolocation. It's not like it hasn't been logged in 30 days. Everything is there. So I'm logged into the bank account. I can do whatever I want. So be careful of that. And so second part there is what you can do about that is encrypt your device. Encrypting the laptop in this case means that you're taking all the data that normally, let's say it's a language like English. Any one of us can read English. And so if I left a document somewhere and you pick it up, you're going to know exactly what I was saying because you can read it. Now flip it over to hieroglyphics. Most of us don't read hieroglyphics. So if I were to take my English document, convert it, and then leave it out there, sure, you could look at it, but assuming you don't have the key to unlock it or you don't know how to translate it, it just looks like gibberish. And that's what encryption does to your computer. It takes all your data, file, your PowerPoints and Excel and Word docs and all that stuff, and it puts it in your hard drive in a format that's scrambled. And if you don't have this very long key, a hash to basically decrypt it, then it's just garbage. Someone can make an image or a copy of your drive, but they won't be able to crack through Windows because they won't even be able to spin up the drive and get to Windows. And then at that point, everything is just jargon and garbage anyway. So super important that you use encryption. It used to be you sort of choose encryption at rest, which is like on your device, and in transit when connecting to websites. You might have remembered 2-3 years ago, Google really drove this. But if a website didn't have a security certificate on top in the bar, it started blocking the website and saying it's not secure, you shouldn't open it. And now, practically speaking, almost every site uses SSL, which is the encryption part of your connection from you to the data center. Whereas before, sites were hosted, and still some are, without any encryption between you and the data center, which means even once I'm on my computer, whatever I'm sending back and forth to the data center, or whatever website I'm on, anyone can view. Anyone out on the internet can see that traffic theoretically and view it, and that's a big no-no. One thing that I will insist on, if anyone doesn't have two-factor authentication on, it is the low-hanging fruit. On any of your systems, especially if you care at all about the security of it, turn on the two-factor authentication. This is where you have an authenticator code to log into a site, or you get a text message every time you log into something. Most of them are smart enough where, for QuickBooks, you might get a text message every time. But for a lot of other sites where if it doesn't look like a high risk scenario, like geographically far away or haven't logged in a long time, if it's not one of those odd scenarios, then it won't keep asking you. So it's not a nuisance in most cases. It's practical. And if it thinks that there's a risk, it'll ask you for a text message, which removes any of the risk of someone getting your password and being able to get in with just that. And to that point, I want to say a couple of years ago, Microsoft, which used to tell you to rotate your password or change your password every 90 or 180 days or whatever it is, they officially took the stance of forget it. Don't even change your password, because it's so common for people to crack passwords that we're much better off turning on multi-factor authentication than enforcing people to change passwords, which honestly, at the end of the day, people probably wrote on Post-its and stuck on their screen anyway. So it's even more insecure because every 90 days you have a new password you're going to forget. And so people would put it on their screen or forget it and reset it anyway. So think about that. Where this many years you were told to change passwords regularly, and now even Microsoft just said, just forget it. You're like, it's not even worth having a new password every 90 days because it's not enough anyway. So, so I would say in that way, I just want to drive home, use multi-factor authentication. Yes, Judy. Oh, sorry.
I just,
Okay. Oh, there you
I
go.
just wanted to point out to anybody on this call that our tax and our accounting software is Intuit, and Intuit does require two-factor authentication every single time. It's like if I go in and then I go out, number one, after a short period of time, while I'm working on a different software, it'll shut itself down because it's got a timer on it. And secondly, every time I go in, I have to use my authenticator on my phone, which is on my phone. And it's one of the things that Amit was telling us, because it's on my phone, you know it's me because it's in my hand. So I just wanted our clients to know that we have taken keeping their data secure very seriously.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's so critical. So I'm glad that you're on top of 2FA for that and other systems, as I know you use 2FA in your other systems as well. So phishing is an interesting thing because it affects different types of consumers and businesses in different ways. And so there's two camps. So I will say there's the phishing that seems to most people very obvious: misspelling, poor grammar, all this stuff. And it turns out there's a real reason for that. If you think like, oh, this is so obvious, like, who's trying to hack me? They actually do that to look for people that are easier targets. So in the camp of all of the broken English type of emails, they know that anyone that clicks on that is much more likely a better target for them to hack. And so they send those knowing that most people that pay any attention to these emails are going to realize, hey, the graphic is off, the language is off, whatever. This is not really FedEx or Best Buy or whatever the email's from. And those have a good success rate for them. Once someone clicks it, those convert. And I'm guessing if you're on this webinar, you're not that person. You're not the one that looks at it and says, hey, that graphic is blurry and it's not real English, but let me click it anyway. You're sort of on the other side, which is highly sophisticated and crafted emails that what they'll do is once some of these hackers are either in your system or have infiltrated your corporate email or your local device, they start copy and pasting the language of the people that you work with or that you do any business with. Meaning, if let's say there was a bad actor that somehow got in between myself and a vendor that we purchased from, they will look at the history of that email and see, how do I speak? How do they speak? And they'll create mail rules. So when I reply, that person will never see my email, but this bad actor will get that email and reply in the same language that they normally respond to me in. If it's hey or yeah or whatever, like they're going to use that similar language. So it's very hard for me to know it's not them because one, it is coming from the right email server. Two, it is from the right person. And all of our anti-phishing stuff has intercepted. It checks if the things are intercepted, and it may not be. So all the more reason that because you don't know if the systems of the people that you deal with have been compromised, you have to be vigilant. And that's the human factor. We do AI-based anti-phishing and anti-impersonation and catch a ton of stuff. And in the last several years, since we've been using it, we've never had anyone have any real attack, or even if passwords were compromised, never had any real data stolen, which is awesome, but nothing is 100%. And so at some level, even the AI engines will miss something. And you have to be vigilant when you receive something that feels wrong or is something like a direct deposit, change of account, wire funds, Any of those things, you have to do a reality check in person or by contacting someone directly before just taking the electronic word for it, so to speak. It's not just you being vigilant. It's you not knowing if someone else that you're working with has been compromised. And I want that to be one of the big takeaways. We talked about encryption. So data backup is another important practical thing for you. If you're a business, chances are your IT does it for you, or you have some system. If you're end residential customer or client, then you should set up something for backup. Just know that the cloud is not backup. And we know this very well because a lot of people will say, oh, my stuff's in Google Drive, or my stuff is in OneDrive, I'm backed up. That, like, no, wrong. What that means is if you lose your device, or if you have some sort of issue where your drive fails or your devices are lost, yes, it's still in the cloud. You've mitigated physical damage, fire, flood, all of that stuff, you're good. What you're not good versus is you were hacked, because when you're hacked, we see this from new clients all the time, is all of the backup and cloud copies, including the recycle bins and 30-day anti-delete and all that stuff, it's all gone. When they get in there, it's all gone. If you don't have a separate backup somewhere outside of this cloud, whether it's Google or Microsoft, they both have the same options, you will lose data. You will lose it all. So be careful to have a backup somewhere. It's not just physical failure like it used to be. We talked a little about 2FA. Okay, I'm talking a lot. Do you want me to take a quick break or any questions, or should I keep going?
Well, one thing I'm present to, you were talking about emails. I sent an email today to a client and had a link from our share file. And it dawned on me, if they're not used to getting that link, they won't know, like somebody even on the receiving end, if I'm sending something, may not know what the heck they're getting. So the
Yeah.
two things I'm present to is don't send a link, don't send an attachment unless I warn somebody or they're expecting it.
Yep.
And then the other thing, if any place where I've been lazy and turned off the two-factor, you just told me to stop being lazy and go turn it back on.
Yeah, it's the security and convenience is always counterbalance. And
Well,
just know that if it's too convenient, it's probably insecure. So yeah,
that's
please turn it back on.
yes. Yeah, my question is this is great because one of the things you said was really key there. I'll bet a lot of people will save their passwords in either uh, Edge or Google or whatever, so that when I log in, it's like, oh yeah, Google is safe. It's secure. It'll save my password fine, and I don't have to remember it.
Yep.
That's probably not as good of an idea as getting like one of those programs where you actually have a password vault.
Yes, absolutely. So the big ones are KeePass, LastPass, Bitwarden, one of those. But having a password vault, one of the things it does for you, which otherwise people couldn't do, is unique passwords for each site. And as we know, right, companies like Equifax, Sony, they have like 9-figure security budgets, and yet they get hacked. So I don't think it's a good plan to say, well, I'm really safe on the internet, I know what I'm doing, because they will get hacked even if you're smart about it. And in those cases, one of the biggest things that you can do to protect yourself is have a unique password. So when, let's say, Sony.com gets hacked, okay, that password got lost, but you know that that password is not used anywhere else. So you don't have to go change passwords. You don't have to worry about what else did they compromise. Whereas people that reuse passwords, like the same password, or even if you think changing the number at the end is helping you, and it doesn't really. So even if you have similar passwords across websites, one hack equals all hacked. That's a real problem. So yeah, that's a great point. Use a password manager.
On Bitwarden, that's a great question because I started to install that. They have various versions. With a company of our size, would we be better off having a company version of Bitwarden or each individual having their own Bitwarden for their computer?
Usually the company version, the main benefit is as people come in and out of roles or terminated or hired, you can have the marketing person automatically have all the marketing passwords. Because even when people try to use password managers for only business stuff, one way or the other, some personal stuff gets in there or vice versa. So just the nature of the fact that some passwords are personal, even if they're business or vice versa, it's better to have the team one because then you can have some level of control over the passwords that otherwise you'll have to go reset one by one if someone is no longer at the company.
Well, I'm not looking at the screen. If it was all on here, nobody can leave the company, number one.
That's a
So
good rule.
that
That's a
it
good
would be
rule.
hazardous to your health, so don't do that.
I mean, I have a question.
Yeah.
So it occurs to me, I just traveled. I just came to Chicago. If I had gotten off the airplane and left my computer on the airplane,
Mhm.
and I called TechVoo and said, I just left my computer on the airplane, could you guys find it and lock it down so that nobody could, is there any kind of, how, and can you protect it, or
Yes.
is it protected, or do I, by calling you, does it do something? Because I know you
Yeah.
hack into my computer all the time.
Hack
And
in.
hack in. Your
So
tech boo
eloquently
comes in
put,
and
Judy.
does
So
stuff for my computer because that's what we hire you to do.
Yeah.
Can you help me if I've left my computer on the plane?
Yes. Okay. So it's protected before you lost it because once you lose it, it's too late. Because let's just say whoever steals it doesn't reconnect to the internet. They take it to a lab or whatever. Yeah, we can't wait to protect it until after you've lost it. So right now it's encrypted already. So if someone gets it, they can wipe it out and they just got a free laptop out of it. And we may not be able to track that. I mean, there are maybe some
No, I
ways,
just
but
mean I didn't know it was
yeah,
encrypted because it
yes.
doesn't operate to me as if it's encrypted.
It's exactly. So because BitLocker, which is the technology that does it, is a Microsoft product, is built into Windows, which by the way is free on any Windows Pro computer. So if you go to Best Buy and buy a Windows Home computer, it does not have BitLocker available. But
oh
you buy
wow.
Pro computers for your business, so those have BitLocker. And what that does is from the moment that the computer turns on and it starts looking at the hard drive, if there's been any attempt, including like let's say you accidentally leave a thumb drive in the computer or a CD in a CD-ROM drive, one of the very common ways that if the computer sees that, thinking that you're trying to boot off of that to ultimately steal data off the hard drive, it locks it down and you have to enter a 25-digit code, which is what we maintain for you in order to be able to start the computer again. At that point, even if you remove the thumb drive or anything else, doesn't matter. Computer will not even attempt to start because it knows that you tried to hijack the process. So as long as you are just booting off the computer directly into Windows, and not doing any other funny business on the side, it will allow you to use your fingerprint or PIN or password to get in because there's a module on there that controls it. But as soon as we just take the hard drive out of the computer or try to intercept and read it in your scenario where you left your laptop on there, they'll get the computer, but they will not get your data. That's the whole point.
That makes me so happy.
Yeah. and if they're dumb enough to connect to the internet at some point, without wiping out the drive, then there's a lot more we can do. Then we basically have full access. But we're going to assume that if they steal it, they want your data, they're not going to connect to the internet, but we're still good.
The
Thank
data
you.
is protected. If they're stupid enough to connect to the internet, then they just got hung.
Yeah, then we're probably going to track it down and they're going to get in bigger trouble.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's actually good information because it's not clear when you go to Best Buy to get a computer, the difference between home and pro. And
Yeah,
when
they
you talk
used
to some
to.
people, they make it sound like, oh, it's the same. It's fine.
Yeah, it's for home usage, it's the same in the sense that you just won't use the pro features, so it feels the same. In a business usage, I can't tell you how many times this was years ago, like where clients would bring their own computer and then they'd have to pay like $100, $200 to Microsoft to upgrade it to pro. And they're like, well, we should have just bought a pro computer then. I'm like, that's what we told you. But then, because the business computers do cost a couple hundred more, of course, because they come with a different license, they're built a different way. But yeah, I mean, for you, that's absolute. And we even encrypt your desktops. There have been too many instances of people being broken into and getting their desktop stolen. That just because you're not mobile doesn't mean that that's not an attack vector. So your desktops are also encrypted.
Well,
I
everything has to be, but yeah, go ahead,
And
Judy.
while we're talking about Best Buy, I just want to throw out there to anybody that has ever thought about buying a computer from Amazon. I did that back in the, a couple years ago when it was COVID and I needed a computer and I didn't want to go out to the store. And I found out that the computer I bought was probably a year plus old, sitting in a warehouse somewhere. Because I bought what I thought was a 3 years ago computer, and Amit looked at it and said, "Oh, this is 4 or 5 years old." So be careful what you get off of Amazon too.
But we both made that mistake, Judy, because I bought one also, and because of what you said, it was sitting on the shelf. Somebody had bought it from the manufacturer, so the warranty was expired before I ever got it. So
So
that's it.
basically, all we're saying is if you have a business and it's an important business to you, you need to call Amit up because he will make sure that you're protected.
Well, make sure you go to a bona fide store, not something online, because you got to be dang careful. And his prices are comparable, I can tell you that, to whatever you would go to Best Buy and get anyway. So
Thank you.
it's easier to go straight to him instead of fussing around with a salesperson that you can't understand.
Thank you.
No, thank you, because it's just been very seamless as we've had to upgrade some computers recently to just be able to go, okay, here, just ship them, ship them, ship them.
Yeah, we sort of pre-configure the management engine and the security on there, and then you log in and hopefully only a couple things to install, and that's it, and we can help you with that. So yeah, I'm glad you're having a good experience. We talked a little bit earlier about VPNs, and this one I wanted to particularly talk about because there are two types of VPN, and maybe during COVID actually, so probably just a few years ago here, personal VPNs became a really big thing. So they existed for many years, but up until COVID, people knew VPNs as the way that you connect to your office. Like if you're on the road and you need to bridge into your office, you use a VPN. All of a sudden, COVID came around and people started doing personal VPNs, meaning if they're at home and they want it for privacy, they want to go through a private tunnel that protects their location, their identity, all these things. Then they hop through a server in Finland or in Norway or in China or wherever. And that became a big thing. So for our context here, we can talk about personal VPNs if you want, but we'll stick to the business VPN because that's the most common one. And what that does is it'll take whatever stuff you have in an office somewhere. Say you have a server or printers or even a desktop computer that you want to remote into. There's a device at your office generally called a VPN router or a firewall, sort of the same thing in this context. You link to it, and that means now whether you're over like halfway around the world or at a Starbucks or whatever, it securely connects you from wherever you're on the internet with a tunnel directly to that office. So now you have a direct path to that office that's secure, and you can now do whatever you want. Log into the computer, print to the printer in the office, connect to a server and run a program on that server from wherever you are. You nowadays are probably using VPNs less and less because everything's cloud centric. So this is back to the sort of the whole cloud migration that started happening because things are at someone else's data center, meaning it's not your office, but it's the Microsoft cloud or the Amazon cloud. You're connecting to them and they're taking care of the public interface from you to the data. So you're no longer having to create a secure channel between where you are and your office. Because nowadays there's really nothing in your office in a lot of cases. There is no server, there is nothing else. You're not even connecting to your desktop. You're literally just on your laptop or your desktop at home with all the same stuff that you'd have at the office anyway. So still uses for it, but you're seeing these less and less nowadays. This is a little bit busy slide, but I wanted to point out that it used to be a lot more effort to hack people, and there were more targeted efforts. Like people would say, oh, I'm not big enough to get hacked. No one cares about my stuff. And maybe to some degree that was true because hospital targets and big corporate targets were just more valuable. The data you'd get out of it was just more valuable. Now, because of proliferation of so many different technologies that are out there and people being so cloud connected, the method of hacking is just different. There's bots that sit on the internet and they don't care or know who you are. They just go through the IP address list from 0 to the end. And if there's a vulnerability they see on your IP, they can get through your modem or your Comcast connection or whatever, then they'll steal whatever they can. And even in some of these really large attacks that are like hospital systems, they were just by chance. Sometimes they didn't know they were going after a big target, but they found something. They used that vulnerability, and now they get in. And I want to use that example to back into why patching your computer is very important. So patching basically means if there's a security update that came out, then you apply it. So let's say Microsoft or Google or whoever says, "Hey, update available." You know, occasionally it's a feature, but most of those updates are security. And the reason that they have to publish it is because there's a known vulnerability, meaning there's a use case for how someone that isn't supposed to be able to get access to your computer or your data can. And because they figured that out, that means it's now in the wild, as it's called. So anyone that doesn't upgrade to the latest version of that software tool, whatever that is, Chrome or Java or Windows, is vulnerable to anyone that knows about this exploit, which obviously the hackers follow like down to the second. So when people don't update their computers for hours, weeks, months, it's really bad news. You're sitting out there with someone that has a key to your house, hoping that they don't turn the key and come inside the house. Because once the vulnerability is released, that's exactly what's happened. They've officially released, hey, this is the problem in the software. We've fixed it, apply. But everyone that doesn't fix it now sits out there on the internet unprotected. So be cognizant of what a big deal that is. Hacking is only getting more common. Okay.
And that's the truth.
I'm going to skip over a little bit of this. Let's talk actually, in the interest of time, we're about 6:15. Let's talk about network risk. So there's this idea that the cloud, as they call it, is just the internet. You're somewhere out there on the internet, but you have a way of getting on the internet, which is your internet service provider, Comcast, AT&T, Spectrum, Verizon, whoever you have for internet. They are giving you, think of it like a highway to get onto the internet. Now, what comes in and out of your network ideally would be just what you want to come in and out of your network. But in most cases, there's more than that. There's some widget or device or program that you're using that's transmitting more data than you wanted to go out, or allowing more bad actors from outside into your network than you would normally want to allow. A firewall is a piece of hardware that sits between the internet connection, which is your Comcast modem, let's say, and what's on the inside of your network. So your laptops, your desktops, your Xbox, your cell phones, all that stuff inside your network at home or your business. And it decides what's allowed, or because you tell it or configure it, and it decides what's allowed and what's not. Not just, hey, we want to block all the traffic coming in from Russia. Sure, you can block that. But you can also say, I don't want any traffic going out to China or India or whatever places that you're not normally doing business. You may want to actively block it. So even if you go somewhere like a website, or you install a program that you trust or you thought was good, if they have backdoors to talk to some other IP ranges, it blocks all that actively. It looks at the traffic constantly, and if it sees malware or viruses in it, it'll filter it out for you in real time. So specifically in an office scenario where there's a lot of users to protect, really honestly more than 2 or 3 users in one place, having a firewall there can make a world of difference. We catch threats all the time that way for clients. With software as a service, things have changed a little bit. So now you're trusting third parties to protect your data. And I mentioned this not because there's a ton you can do about it, to be honest, but if you are doing business, as Judy mentioned, at Intuit, you are trusting that they will provide you something like MFA to log in. Now, let's say for some reason you were using some no-name product that just had a username and password with no MFA. You're susceptible to getting hacked. And if somebody were to get the password from that site, they could log in as you from anywhere at any time, and you couldn't do anything about it, and you wouldn't even know because it's a successful login. So we have sort of shifted some of our security burden to the providers that give us our software as a service now. And there are hundreds, right? There's Facebook and Gmail and some of these icons that I put up, but we are inherently now trusting these places. So one of the things, as we talked about before, is use different passwords. You can't expect that none of them will ever get hacked. Certainly some will. So one of the best things you can do is not give them the password to multiple sites in one shot.
That brings up an interesting thing because you have MailChimp up there.
Mhm.
And if I'm correct, MailChimp is owned by Intuit.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And what I have noticed with Intuit is there's one login. And it gets me into my tax software, the accounting software. If we had MailChimp, it would get us into that.
Yep.
Does that make it? I mean, they have access to whatever I have if they happen to hack that one password.
Yeah, so that's called single sign-on. Sometimes you'll see it on sites, it's called SSO, and it's convenient, but also not a bad idea actually, because what it does is it centralizes your credential. It says that there is one server in the back here, call it like Intuit servers, and they have multiple web applications like MailChimp and QuickBooks Online and all these other things that rely on that one provider. You've probably seen it on a lot of sites where they say log in with Google, log in with Facebook, log in with LinkedIn. All they're doing is they're saying, we're not even in the business of holding onto your password or your credentials. When you want to log into our site, we're going to proxy through LinkedIn or Google or whoever you trust. And if you ever update your password there or delete your account or whatever it is, we're just going through there. And so if you're legit over there, then you're not even trusting us to do it. We're getting a token from that server that says, yeah, I know Bill's trying to log into XYZ site. He wanted to log in with Google. So let's go back to Google servers, let them do whatever they do to make sure it's really Bill. Now that server will talk to the one you're actually trying to log into and say, oh yeah, that is Bill. Go ahead and let him log in. Here's his email address. Here's his profile picture. Here's his first and last name. All that comes with it. So your profile is basically ready to go using whatever data Google already has because you use that to log in. And that's not a bad thing.
That's a plus because Google is going to be more secure than the Joe Blow software that's trying to link to it. So I can get
Yeah.
that. The downside is going to be when Google gets hacked, they got access to everything now.
Yes, there are sort of these superset type companies where basically it's keys to the kingdom. I mean, if you think of a lot of people's like Gmail or Microsoft 365 accounts, I mean, your entire identity is there. Like everything that you someone would possibly want to do to take over your identity and your money is there. Like they could go to Vanguard and Fidelity and everything you have everywhere. And if they hack your email, between the tax returns you probably emailed and things that people just do over time, or even if you weren't reckless, I've had enough experiences with like mortgage people that are totally reckless that just forward everything in like plain text or PDF or whatever. It's chaos. So once someone hacks a super set like Google, just assume that stuff is all gone. I know that doesn't make you feel warm and fuzzy, but those are large targets for a reason.
They're also harder to get into.
Absolutely. Yeah. I don't know how accurate the stat is, but a couple of years ago, we were looking at a software called SiteMinder. It's what big companies use for credential management. And they said on bank logins, consider this, a little bit over 93% of all bank logins are invalid or fraudulent. So of all the logins hitting a bank all day, every day, the vast majority are either garbage or fraud or trying to do a brute force attack.
Well,
So Yeah.
Well, AI, you had said something about it earlier. You're supposed to make our life easier. I'm not sure it's going down that path yet.
It's helping. I can tell you on the email filtering side, because you have it, right? We apply it for us and you, is the AI logic on the inbound email and outbound email, actually. It is catching things that
Oh,
they're
that's
engineered
true.
very
That's
well.
true.
So, for example, let's say like we had a client that received an email from a new domain name, but it looked exactly the same. Instead of 2 L's, they put 3 L's in it, but it was like a long domain name. So anyone looking at that would not have caught the third L in that long domain name. Everything was crafted perfectly. The first name, the last name, and all of the email checks that we do even passed. SPF, DKIM, DMARC. It was set up professionally. It was a real email, right? From someone who had a domain name slightly different than what the customer was wanting to use. So our customer reaches out and says, hey, this is someone that we deal with all day, every day. And so we're thinking, well, maybe they got hacked. But let's check it out, right? We look at it. Even we're sort of turning up and being like, that's really odd because the email's legitimate and there was no bad payload. This was not the bad email. This was the starting of a chain that they were doing. So they were going to build trust over time. But our system caught it, and it became very obvious once we looked at the analytics. It's because the domain name was registered less than 2 months ago. So we
Oh, wow.
caught that. So one, the anti-impersonation caught that, yeah, Bob Smith, whatever the name was. Like, yeah, you know Bob Smith, and this is Bob Smith, and they're with this company. Everything looks similar. However, it flagged it for us and pulled it automatically because it said this domain name was registered less than 2 months ago, which is very odd for someone that you've been doing business with for this long. And so those are the things that AI catches. And, to some degree, that's algorithmic, not AI. But those are the things that humans are not going to catch. We didn't even catch that. When we first glanced at it, we're like, yeah, that's really odd. Like the payload's fine. It doesn't make sense. But we're catching those things nowadays that we wouldn't have
Yep.
before.
Yeah, you caught one of something like that for me recently where it looked like somebody legit and it's like, yeah, wait a minute. And they were fishing. It's like, yeah, no, I'm not talking to them.
Yeah, and they're highly sophisticated, right? On your website, it says the names of the partners. It wouldn't be that hard if someone wanted to reach out to you and say that they're Judy. You'd be like, oh, I think I know a Judy. Like, right? I mean, it's not that hard to have the first name, last name, photo, even
No.
whatever, but create the signature so it looks legitimate, copy paste from any forward they got from who knows where. So yeah, back to sort of the core problem, right? Vigilance.
Yeah.
So sort of to summarize here, I know we're coming up on time. Please focus on security and your own cyber hygiene, and because it's too easy to make a mistake. And once you crack it open a little bit, a complete takeover is not that hard from a technical perspective. Use the tools you're paying for, like BitLocker in Windows or MFA at your email provider. Consolidate stuff and plan. Right? Just like password manager. It doesn't mean you have to go out tonight and do it. But if you're going to implement a password manager, implement it now. It'll tell you immediately, like, hey, 132 sites, you're using the same password. So it takes time, but maybe do 10 at a time. But one by one, go change the passwords so you have unique passwords throughout everything. And ask, right? If you don't know, ask someone because it's not worth getting hacked.
Well,
Yeah, we'll skip this.
I want to throw something in too on it because we talked about this recently. If anybody on this call gets hacked or you by any chance stumble on somebody that's gotten hacked, the number one thing you do is turn off your computer, disconnect from the internet, and call a tech support person. You don't try to fix it yourself because you'll just I just got a phone call. You just make it worse. So
Yeah.
call a professional. Turn off your
Well,
computer.
and you have to,
disconnect.
yeah, you have to do thinking because disconnect from the internet sounds like a good idea. But when I go pull my Ethernet cord, it's just going to switch to Wi-Fi. So it's like there's sometimes where it's like when that's happening, I got to go in there. I'm just going to unplug the dang router, then I'm done. So there's the thinking to do of how are you going to disconnect also because we are so connected these days, it's kind of hard to disconnect.
Yeah, hyperconnectivity is a real thing. You're right.
Yeah.
Yeah, so thank you for giving me that time. I felt like I was doing a lot of talking here, so I appreciate the questions in between.
Yeah, you were doing a lot of talking, but it's useful information and it's something that
Yeah.
I think Janine put in the chat. Send her an email, reach out to her if you would like a copy, or reach out to one of us and we can make sure you get a copy of his slides and stuff. But
Oh, for sure.
it's something to take it very seriously because I know in some of the seminars Lorna and I went to, if we get hacked, we don't keep things secure, it can get real expensive real fast.
Yes,
Yep.
absolutely. Yeah, we've seen into six figures for sure on per
Yeah.
hack. Yeah, and I mean, of course, you hear the stories in the news about 10, 100 million plus type of attacks, but it's a bunch of things. It's reputation. The companies sometimes don't recover from. It's the cost of data loss in multiple ways. And just don't assume that cyber liability will cover it. We talked at the beginning of the conversation.
Sure.
But yeah, cyber liability will not necessarily cover it. The bank sure as heck won't cover it nowadays. It used to be all the time. They'd make you whole. And now they're like, oh, you should have verified. Like that is not in our budget. Good luck.
Yeah.
Well, just
They've,
look at Children's Hospital.
Mhm.
It's still shut down from what I understand, and it's reverberating everywhere. I mean, I'm part of a healthcare society, and they're just talking about the impact that it's having all over the country, actually.
Oh yeah. A friend of mine, his fiance works at Lurie Children's and said it was just chaos. Like everything went to paper for a few days and then even now, and as IT people, I look at that as like, oh, how could they not get back up and running? But it's not that they don't have backups or systems. I think it's that the infiltration was so deep over so much time that it would be embarrassing to come back up and just get rehacked. So they like can't put their backups back up because there's no way for them to know it's secured. So they would just be putting themselves back out there to get hacked. So it's a mess. They
And
are
I
going through
think
with a
they
fine tooth
got
comb.
into Epic, um, which is the electronic medical record that hospitals use all over the country. The hospitals
Yeah,
pushed everybody into going into Epic. And
yeah.
that's what I was reading online, is that different Epic systems in different states are being impacted by this, that where they were sending records back and forth and that hacking went with it to the other locations. So it's awful.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, stay updated. Equifax, that was a known vulnerability. Had they just patched it, that whole thing wouldn't have happened. It's free, easy,
Wow.
simple. They have they have a huge IT department, and they did not patch it. It's a known vulnerability. Those are the things that it's the same for you. Right? As an end user, if you choose not to patch something, well, you can't because we do it for you. We force it. But let's just say you wanted to go rogue. Yeah, if you wanted to go rogue and buy a computer and not tell us about it, not patching it is just it's the easiest thing. It's the seatbelt. If you want to drive without a seatbelt, 99.9% of the time you will be fine. The one time you wouldn't have been, you will wish you wore it. And that's what the security patching is. Just do it.
Is that the same thing for the Apple phone when you get a notification that there's an Apple update and you need to plug it in tonight and do it? I've always kind of said I'm going to wait and see if the bugs are out of it, but is that something that I should be updating immediately?
You should, because chances are you're not reading what the update notes are. Occasionally it's like small bug fixes that you don't care about, and in which case, whatever. Other times that they are more important security updates. I will say this, on the very big ones, it's only been a couple of them that are huge. They basically force the update overnight. So if it's really crazy, I don't think you have a choice. But the ones that come by, you should do them because you don't know which ones are security versus which ones are bug fixes.
Okay.
That's the one thing I'm good about. I usually, if it comes through on the phone and it says it's going to update tonight, I say, you're not. No, you're not. You're going to do it now.
Good, good.
So for anybody, again, that's on this, please be aware that this video is going to be uploaded on our YouTube channel, probably within a week or two. Not only can you ask for the slides, but you can watch it again if you want. And we have added several things on our YouTube channel. So we now have a pretty interesting inventory. So if you haven't been and seen some of the other people that have spoken for us, check it out. See what else is there that you can learn.
Okay, so that is all I had. Thank you for the questions and for your time. I hope it was informative, because it's a topic that I take very seriously.
Well, now
Thank
we
you.
do. Now we do too.
Yeah, exactly.
Awesome. Glad to hear that.
Well, I got a text yesterday that looked like it was from Amazon. It was one of those, hey, did you log in from another device? Click this link, whatever.
Yeah.
And my daughter does that all the time because she's at college, but I noticed that it didn't say the location. So then I looked a little closer and I'm like, this is not from Amazon, but it looks like it is. It came through
Yeah.
on that same
Yeah.
thread. So
Yeah. Because if it looks like it's the same sender,
Mhm.
there's no verification. It's just going to add it to there. So it's a group for you.
So
Yep.
that's
Yeah.
another question. If somebody texts me their social security number, because they're not going to email it to me because my system won't allow it anymore. If they text me their social security number, is that just as dangerous as emailing it?
Not just as dangerous, but dangerous because text messages don't as often accidentally get forwarded, and phones don't as often get hacked. It's all possible, but it's worse in the email because basically an email is never deleted. It goes through multiple hops, multiple servers. Like you don't know where that thing's, even if you permanently delete it on your computer, it's probably not gone. Text
Hmm.
message, on your iPhone, for example, it's automatically encrypted. So if the phone is lost, chances are it'll get wiped and you won't lose the data. But ideally, it should be over the phone. Yeah, I mean, sending that over text, anything plain text as it's called, it should be avoided. It should be some secure link or at least a password protected folder or something. It should be avoided to send it in plain text.
Yeah, normally I want somebody to just, if they're going to give it to me when I'm not around, put it on a piece of paper and upload it into ShareFile because
Yeah,
that's our encrypted vault.
yeah, much
The
better. Yeah, ShareFile is a
Only
much
other
better
thing
way.
you can do is send the first 5 characters via text and the last 4 via email, so nobody gets the
Yeah.
whole thing. It takes more effort, but
Yeah.
I think one key thing, if you want to be secure, it's going to take some effort and it's going to cut down on some convenience, but it could save you a whole heck of a lot of heartache and headache in the long run. Awesome. Thank you for the presentation. Thanks for being here.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you, Amit.
All right. Good night, all.
Thank
Good
you,
night.
everybody.